Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. Let's see who is in here. Let's say a hello. If you can hear me, if you can see me, let's hear your voices. Nice, nice. Can see people dropping in. We can all say hello to Reese as well. Thanks for modding today. Nice. Okay, so we are going to get straight into business today. Now, I will just say that I am going to go through a couple of things from last week. If you weren't here last week, then don't worry too much about it. If you were here last week, then obviously you can tolerate me going on about it for a little bit longer. Really nice to see people dropping in, saying hello, greeting each other, greeting me. It's awesome to have you here again for that second week. So in today's lesson, we're going to be looking at, again, how to understand, analyze, and write newspaper articles. Particularly in today's session, what we really care about is going undercover. Now, what that means, you're going to absolutely love this again. I love my acronyms. So I know there's obviously a bit of a lag with the time, but anyone want to remind everybody what an acronym is? Because under and cover are two acronyms that we're going to be using today. So who can remember what an acronym is? Let's see it appear in the chat. Let's see. Can't see anything yet. What something stands for? Nice one. Atif. Yeah, word with each letter representing a word, something that stands for something. An abbreviation, kind of. Yeah, it is kind of an abbreviation. So under and cover, they're both going to stand for something. So U is going to stand for something, N is going to stand for something, D is going to stand for something, etc., etc. Okay, so we're going to get stuck into those ones later on in today's lesson. For those of you who weren't here last week, I know a couple of people are saying that you weren't here last week. This is your first session. So I'm just going to remind those of you who were here and let everyone else know who weren't here who I am. So I'm Louis Provis. I'm Head of English here at MyEdspace. I am a fully qualified English teacher. I've got over 10 years of teaching experience. Before I started teaching, I got a degree in English from the University of Oxford before getting a master's degree from there, and I also have a master's degree with distinction from the University of Cambridge. In my 10 years of teaching, I've also spent 9 of those years examining for the major English exam boards that we are all familiar with. So I'm not going to go on too much about myself because it's very boring, but that's me. That's why you can listen to what I'm saying. I've got my experience, I've got my expertise, and hopefully that means that I'm going to help you get to where you need to be in English. So, last week we started off with some headlines, didn't we? We started off with a bunch of headlines which were all examples of fake news. Now, fake news is stuff that has been invented to try and, to mislead you, or maybe to get your money, or maybe to take advantage of you in some way or another. And we were able to identify the sorts of things that fake news did in their headlines. And in that way, we were able to avoid them as we got to them later on in the lesson. What I'm going to ask you to do, your first task, is to try and identify which of these 10 headlines are real headlines that I found from real newspapers, and which ones are essentially ones that have been made up to try and catch you out. So I want you in your workbooks to sort the fact from the fiction in these headlines. Now, if you can't find this in your workbook, or you didn't manage to download the workbook, if any of those things are the case, you can just share your thoughts on the chat. So the ones that you think are true, you put a T next to it. So maybe if you think number 1 is true, you might put 1T. And if you think number 2 is false, you might put 2F. Let's share those ones in the chat. Work through your workbook if you have your workbook in front of you, okay? So you should find this in your workbook. It's in a table, so the headlines are in a table, and then on the right-hand side, you can identify whether you think it is true or fake news, okay? But feel free to share in the chat. Yeah, let's get it going. Okay, interesting. Interesting thoughts coming in. People think number 1 is true. Okay, cool. Some other people think 1 is false. 6 they think is true. Ofcom, almost a quarter of kids aged 5 to 7 have smartphones. Okay. Interesting. Tory backbencher. Where's that one? That was... okay. Interesting. 1 is true. 2 false. Labour unveils plans for new housing on Grey Belt. Why do you think that one's not true? Number 5, not newsworthy. 5, Nigerian 29-year-old attempts to break chess marathon record. Well, I mean, if it's a record, it might be newsworthy. People are arguing about whether 3 is true or false. Okay. Feel free, when you're sharing these ideas, to justify where you're coming from. So we talked last week, for those of us who were here, all about the sorts of things that fake news did that would be able to help us identify that it's not real news. Okay, so maybe chuck in your justifications. So some of you have said, I think this is true because I've seen it on the news. Awesome. If you think it's false because it seems really unlikely. People saying 10 is false. Why do you think 10 is false? Are there any clues in there? People think 5 is true. So people are arguing that 5 actually might be true. So feel free to justify your thoughts. I guess 3 is possible. What's number 3? A scandalous affair with Tory backbencher. Do you not think we'd have heard about it? 3 probably false because I've never heard of it. So nice justification there, Jayshree. Thank you. 7 people think it's true. Playing music out loud on the bus or train to become criminal offence. Well, let's have a look, shall we? So some of you are still sharing your thoughts. I'm going to put you out of your misery and tell you which ones are true and which ones are false. Okay, so let's have a look at them. So the first one, Harry Styles' stalker jailed after sending him 8,000 cars. Believe it or not, that one is true. That one genuinely happened. Harry Styles did have a stalker who had sent him over 8,000 cards to his address. Second one, Labour unveils plans for new housing on Grey Belt. Most of you got that one, the ones that mentioned it. Some of you said that it was maybe not newsworthy, which I think is a fair point. Liz Truss admits to scandalous affair with Tory backbencher. That one's false. And lots of you are saying it's probably because it seems quite unlikely that we wouldn't have heard about it from other news sources. For number 4, murder hornets swarm schools who teach evolution instead of creation. I mean, there are a lot of kind of clues that one is a bit silly. I mean, murder hornets. I mean, that's not a real animal. It just sounds quite scary. Swarm schools who teach evolution instead of creation. So this one seems like it's trying to be biased against schools who teach evolution instead of creation. So maybe it has a religious aspect to this fake news. This chap trying to break the chess marathon record. That's true. That really happened. Or is really going to happen. It is also true that almost a quarter of kids aged 5 to 7 have smartphones. Playing music out loud. So what were our clues on there? Well, some of you mentioned this already about the spelling. Out loud isn't a word. And offence has been spelled in the American way. So there was your clue about spelling, punctuation, grammar, Americanizations. Prince Harry and Hugh Grant punch up. Latest scenes uncovered. Again, very similar to the to number 3. Because these are famous people, Prince Harry and Hugh Grant, you would think that you would have heard about it if they had had a big fight with each other. Road workers shot at with BB guns in Salisbury. Sadly, that is true. And then The Simpsons' beloved TV show to end after 34 seasons. Well, that word beloved, that might be a clue that it's biased. 34 seasons, that is true, but the show ending is false, okay? You would probably also have something like The Simpsons with some quotation marks to show that it is the name of something. So all of these sorts of things were big clues. Just share quickly for me, how many did you get right? Give me a score out of 10 in the chat. Let them all zoom up the screen. I want to see how well we learnt our skills from last week. Let's see. Can't see any numbers coming up yet. Maybe there's a bit of a delay. 10 out of 10, amazing. Wow, loads of you got 10 out of 10. 8, very strong. 10 out of 10. 9, 8, 10, 9. 9.5. How'd you get half one right? Did you put true/false or did you just not do it? 8 out of 10. Yeah. 9, 10, 8. Wicked. Yeah. Awesome. Fantastic work, guys. Right, I'm really happy with that. That shows that we've clearly taken on board those things from last week. So high fives to yourselves. Now, this looks like a lot of text, but don't worry. You've got it in your workbooks as well, and I'm going to talk you through every single part of it. Now, news stories, what they're trying to do is to tell you a story in its rawest form. It's trying to be as clear as possible without any unnecessary description or emotion or characterization, all the things that we think are really great to do in our own creative writing. What newspapers do is they go, okay, well, all that stuff is fantastic for a novel, but for a newspaper, all I want to do is tell the facts, okay? So here are two versions of a story. Over on the left-hand side, we've got the story as if it would come from a novel, and then on the right-hand side, we've got how the news would tell the exact same story. So, buckle in. I'm going to read the one to you on the left. Please be following on in your own workbooks. Here we go. With an almighty crack, the grand oak collapsed, folding at the middle like a rugby prop shot in the stomach. The wood splintered, sending 1,000 shards of miniature oaken arrows into the sky to come raining down on poor Jimmy, who stood in awe, unable to move. An earth-shaking crash followed as the tree slammed into the road. There was a deafening silence after that deafening noise. Jimmy, still struck stock still, resembled a porcupine, so adorned with splinters was he. The blood had not yet started to flow, the splinters served as plugs. Jimmy's tears had not yet started to fall, the shock and adrenaline served as anaesthetic. Suddenly, he was running. He didn't know why, but a force compelled him to run, so he ran without stopping all the way home. Dad! Dad! The big oak at Cadbury just fell down and it spat all its guts at me. Oh, my Jimmy, his father gulped. Sit down, I'll call 999. Okay, so that's the story as you might find it in a novel. And you can all congratulate me on a great job done at creative writing. Over on the right-hand side, we've got how the news would tell that very same story. Now, it's exactly the same details, but it's just how the newspaper would report it. So let's pay attention to as I read it through. Feel free to put into the chat what you notice, that what is different about the way that this one here is written compared with that one that we just read before. Okay, so how the news tells it. A 300-year-old oak tree has fallen into the B463 road in Calbury, officials report, blocking traffic in both directions this morning. A diversion has been set up via Church Avenue until further notice. James Cadwallader, 12, was on the scene and has been injured by debris emitted by the splitting of the tree's body. The child, a pupil of King Edward's Middle School, was walking to school when the tree collapsed in front of him. Upon his return home, his father, Jonathan Cadwallader, 44, called the emergency services, who conducted him to Calbury Royal Hospital, where his wounds were treated. He has since been allowed to return home. The exact cause of the tree's collapse is unknown. Local Forestry Commissioner Mark Hansen, 56, has suggested that California fungus may be to blame. Locals lament the loss of the tree, which has been a mainstay in the village since it was founded, says Belinda Thompson, 82, whose house overlooks the plot. Okay, so lots of you are sharing your thoughts. It's not that narrative. Clearly has those first, the 5 W's in the first paragraph. Nice one, Invisible Cloaks. So we call that the lead, don't we? News 1 is very formal. Agreed, Samai. Not very interesting. I agree. It just tells the facts as they are. Belay tells exactly what happened. Yeah, without a doubt, it's just being really, really clear. Did anyone spot the typo? Did anyone spot the typo in the final paragraph? There's something missing. Interesting, Jayashri. News is all logos. A novel has a very detailed description, nicely put together. So logos, you're obviously referring to the 3-part structure for Aristotle, aren't you? We're actually going to be doing that later on in this course. News report, more info in detail, the names, more boring, very straight. Yeah, I agree. It is kind of boring. Too formal, too boring. I mean, not necessarily. It has to get the information across somehow. If we try and dramatize it, people won't take it seriously, will they? Anyone spotted that typo yet? No? I would say that I planted it there deliberately. Yeah, well done. Spotted it. Yeah, so it's missing the end part of this quotation here. So when Belinda Thompson, 82, quotes, this bit here needs to have its closing quotation marks. Yeah, okay. Okay. Yes, the story version isn't in the workbook. That's absolutely right. That's deliberate because we're not focusing on that type of storytelling. That's something we can come on to later on in the course. Lots of you are spotting that the quotation mark, or inverted comma as some of you are calling it, speech mark, etc. It's missing from the end of her quote. Mainstay in the village since it was founded is what Belinda Thompson said. Yeah? Okay, so we figured out essentially what is different about this kind of writing from the other kind of writing. It's not a novel, it's a brand new thing, okay? It's brand new. So, what is it that the news story does? Well, the first thing they do is in terms of the cover, okay? The cover, I told you it was an acronym. Here it is in its full form. We have C for clarity, O for objectivity, V for voices, E for evidence, and R for reliability. Okay? So clarity basically means that the writing is direct and unambiguous, meaning unambiguous means that it can't be confused for something else. So it's very, very clear and direct. Objectivity is just the facts and no emotion. Now, some of you are saying that makes it boring, and I kind of agree. But if we have emotions in there, people aren't going to believe it as much because they might think that the writer is just emotional or cares too much about it to be telling an unbiased story. So objectivity is just the facts, no emotion. Save the emotion for your other kind of writing. Voices, that V for voices, witnesses or experts sharing their thoughts. And we've got that obviously on several occasions in this version here, haven't we? Evidence, research, statistics, dates, places, anything which fixes this in the real world. So look for things like numbers, look for mentions of studies, look for any place names mentioned, look for any official people being mentioned. All of these things that fix it in reality are going to make it easier for us to believe that this is a true story being told. And then finally, R for reliability. You've got valid sources of information because, as we said last week, if the story had just come from, I don't know, my mate Tony down the pub, I'm not necessarily going to believe it, am I? I'm not necessarily going to go, yeah, well, Tony's not really an expert on this, but, you know, he's a good guy, so I'm going to trust him. No, we want an expert talking about expert things. So I'm not going to be asking a random person about the cause of a tree falling down because they're only going to be guessing. Instead, I'm going to go to a forestry commissioner, Okay, so someone who is in charge of understanding how the trees are all working, and I'm going to be talking to him. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is try and identify on your version where any of these things are coming from. So, for example, I've done one of them for you. Has gaming. So, if voices is search, for example, witnesses, yeah, exposure. Was shown in the thoughts. Yeah, so when you've got other voices involved, that's where you're quoting people. So we've quoted two people. They're different types of people, different types of witnesses, or different types of experts, and we are including them to show that this is not something that is just made up by the journalist, not something that only the journalist cares about. So our top example here is from an expert, Mark Hansen, and our second example here is from a witness, someone who was there and who can share their own personal reflection on what's been going on. Okay, so voices are what we found there. What I would like to try and do, you can annotate this on your workbook and also put it into the chat. Where do you think you can see examples of clarity, objectivity, evidence, and reliability? So throw some of those into the chat as you annotate your workbooks. Where are you finding examples of these other things going on? Okay? I'm going to watch the chat come to life with these great ideas that people are going to generate. Share those thoughts, guys. I'm fascinated to know what you've been able to spot. Awesome. Yes, completely agree. Names and specific places. Yeah, names and specific places would fall into the category of evidence. Yeah. Objectivity, the whole first paragraph. Direct and unambiguous. Nice. Yeah, that whole first paragraph where it is the lead. Yeah, so LEDE, as we said last week. So that's obviously ticking that box of clarity. It's just the facts recorded straight away. For clarity, say the age. Nice. Yeah. Reliability is seen in the way the news tells where the road is and what specific one it is. Definitely. Reliability, 100%. We can see valid sources of information. Yeah. Nice one, Rambo. Yeah, completely agree. Clarity in the first statement. Yes. Nice one, Tasnim. Evidence is included. Where can you find some evidence, Gustav? Where can you find that evidence? It talks about everything, yeah. Paragraph 2 has some information about the child. What category would that fall into from cover? Evidence. Nice. Nice. Father is a witness for the voice. Yeah, also falls into voices, yeah. So it doesn't quote him directly, does it? But obviously the mention of him suggests that they've probably spoken to him. So I guess he could also count as another one of our voices. He's not quoted directly, but we still hear from him, don't we? So lots of people talking about all the evidence in the first paragraph. So it's 300 years old. It's the B463 road. It is in Calbury. A diversion has been set up via Church Avenue. So all of these names of official places and facts are clearly about clarity and objectivity. Yeah, what else have we seen? Evidence in the third paragraph, yeah. Emergency services, Calbury Royal Hospital. So if we go through and we just spotted anything that includes names, so we've got James, who is obviously Jimmy from the original story. We've got Jonathan, we've got Calbury Royal Hospital, we've got Mark Hansen, we've got Belinda Thompson, we've got B463. So all of these things are evidenced, right? Because they have specific numbers, specific facts. It fixes it in the real world, and that's that kind of key thing, okay? Okay. So other people have mentioned, of course, that it mentions the ages every time. Every time someone is mentioned, it has their ages straight after. So we've got 12, 44 for his dad, 56 for the forestry commissioner, 82 for Belinda. Other people are mentioning that you also find out who these people are. So father, so that's obviously a fact, isn't it? We've got the child, a pupil of King Edward's Middle School, so we find out who he is. What happened to them after? I don't know, it's a made up story. There you go. So I can't possibly tell you. But you can see that cover is how we get all of these ideas across. But wait, there is more, because we can dig under the covers to find out what is going on with the language. So, what is under the cover? So, under is now looking at how we put language into a news story to try and generate the kind of the official formal style that we're looking for in a newspaper. So we have under, which stands for unexciting punctuation, noun phrases in apposition. Wait a minute, what on earth is that? We're going to have to come back to that one, aren't we? Declarative sentences, erudite, not expressive, and register being formal. Now, all of that is potentially brand new language for you today. So before I give away the game, does anybody already arrive today with the expertise that can tell me, for example, what noun phrases in apposition are? You might have heard them called appositives in school. Who wants to tell me what a noun phrase in apposition might be? And if you're struggling, I'm going to show you the examples of where it happens in text. I'm just going to underline them, just subtly. There it is, underlined. There is another example. Here's another example. Okay, so I've got you 3 examples. Three examples here of noun phrases being used in apposition. Okay. Who reckons they can tell me what they might be? What might noun phrases in apposition mean? By the way, see a spelling mistake in the acrostic poem. It's supposed to be because they both start with E, so erudite, not expressive. But you're right, it can be a bit confusing. Noun phrases placed next to another word or phrase to identify or rename it. Jivan Singh, I think that's beautifully written. Deepak, embedded words, yeah, in an embedded clause straight after. Noun phrases to identify. Absolutely. So we've got extra info, Gustav. Yeah, agreed. All of those are different ways of expressing it, where you have an introduction to who the person is or what the thing is, and then we say again what they are. So for example, Mr. Provis, head of English at my Headspace, thinks you're all fantastic. Okay, that would be an example of noun phrases in apposition, because there's Mr. Provis, that's one, or Louis Provis, that's one. Head of English at my Headspace, there's another one that means the same thing, giving extra information, and then it goes on to say the verbs, which is thinks you're all fantastic. Okay, yeah, so you've all figured out what apposition is just from those examples. Let's see if we can do that from, who's going to tell me then what a declarative sentence is? Who's going to tell me what declarative sentences are? I reckon some of you will have done this in primary school, if not in year 7, 8, and I know some of you are in year 9 as well. So what is a declarative? What is a declarative? Save your thoughts on the other ones for now. Declarative sentences, what are they? What are declarative sentences? And don't worry, Tasby, we are going to come back to noun phrases and apposition. Don't worry, we're just trying to see if we can spot them first. What are declarative sentences, guys? Command sentence, no. Command sentence, that's an imperative. Declaring something in a sentence like a point. Yeah, nice one, Taran. I like that. Sentences to finalise an argument or debate. States a fact. Atif states a fact. That's spot on. Sentence that makes a statement, Jivan, yes. A sentence is not a command. Not a command. Don't you worry if you've never done any of this before. So it's not a command. That would be an imperative. So I'm just going to make a quick note of that so we don't get confused. So imperative is not the same as declarative. So an imperative is a command, declarative is a statement. Okay, lots of you have got that one. Beautiful, good job. Okay, so declarative sentences, I think you'll find that all of the sentences in here are going to be declarative. They're just saying something. They're not asking you a question. They're not commanding you to do anything. They're not reacting in an exclamative way. Really, really simple. Okay. Right, now when I say, now this is a potentially complex word again, what does erudite mean? Who can tell me what erudite might mean? I know that we're picking up loads of vocabulary today, guys. I want to pack as much valuable information into these lessons as possible. You can go away and you can spend more time with these brand new words, but for now we're just going to hammer all of them in, see how many we can retain as we get through. Let's see. Erudite. Who's going to tell me what erudite means? I wonder if anyone's going to Google it or check a dictionary if they don't already know. Who's going to feel resourceful? It's not cheating, it's being resourceful. As long as you're obviously not doing it in an exam situation, you can use those resources that you have available. Let's see. Is it a synonym of smart? Yes, it is. Having or showing great knowledge or learning. Showing great amount of knowledge. Something that tells having or showing great knowledge or learning. Okay, so that is what erudite means. Erudite is basically sounding smart and well-informed and educated, but not being over the top expressive. So we're not going to have words that are showing off like, from the original story, we might have words like cacophony. But a cacophony is too expressive. We just want to be learned. So we're just going to say something like words like diversion. Okay, so these impressive words, these quite rare words, diversion and debris. Okay, so those are examples of erudite language. They're fancy language, showing knowledge, but they're not trying to be too dramatic. They're not trying to be too intense. Okay. Unexciting punctuation then, guys. We don't need to zoom in and spot all of these. Essentially, what we're looking at is, well, we've got full stops, haven't we? We've got commas. We've got hyphens where needed. We've got apostrophes where needed. What don't we have? What exciting punctuation do we not have? Has anyone spotted what we don't have in this writing in terms of exciting punctuation? What don't we have that would bring this one to life if we were to write a novel, for example? So there's unexciting punctuation instead of exciting punctuation, like what? Exclamation marks. Yes, Lishan. We don't have exclamation marks. You would almost never have them in the news. If you do find it in the news, it's potentially a sign that it's not very serious news, or maybe even fake news. Question marks. Again, we're not going to have question marks because we're not trying to engage directly with an audience. They're just going to be reading it. Lots of you saying exclamation marks. Reese, I love that you demoed using exclamation marks when trying to get people involved. Awesome. Not many... what else is there? What else is there? People are saying the same ones. We might sometimes have a semicolon, but again, it might overcomplicate things. Lots of people just typing exclamation marks now. Yes, we wouldn't have exclamation marks. Ellipses. Yes, Taran, you're absolutely spot on. We would never find ellipses in a newspaper because it's too dramatic. Okay, it would make it seem like it is not believable, not serious. Okay. some of you typing out colons and semicolons. We would sometimes find them, but not as commonly. Mariam, yeah, that is an example of an ellipsis. Quotation marks we would have, because we're quoting people. We're missing, what are these called? Okay, if I just draw them onto my screen, what are these called? Just going to draw them, around my head. What are those called? We don't have those. And we also don't have, what's this called just above it? Well, we're never going to find that one. Some of you saying the upside down question mark. Yeah, we're not going to find that either. Because this, this is not a European language. Brackets, well done. We don't have brackets. What else don't we have? Dashes, well done, Taran. Dashes. So dashes are different from hyphens. We'll have a hyphen because it connects words together. We're not going to have dashes because they're usually for sticking extra information onto the end of something, making it seem like an afterthought. Bada bing, bada boom, we're not going to have them. Okay, so we are clearly seeing that we don't have exciting punctuation. We're clearly seeing we've got noun phrases using apposition. We're seeing that all the sentences are declarative. We've got erudite but not expressive language. And finally, we're on to this one, register, which is how formal something is. Who's going to find examples for me of where this piece of writing is being formal rather than informal? And for an extra, crisp high five, how would you put it in an informal way? And why hasn't the newspaper writer, the journalist, chosen to do that? Let's throw some ideas into the chat. For those of you asking about apostrophes, yes, we will have apostrophes. You can obviously see that example in trees in the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph because we need it for understanding. It's part of proper English, as Taran said. So using, you're absolutely, using proper English is to do with being formal. It's not quite the same. Lots of you using examples. Laments, that is an example of formal language. Lament the loss of the tree. If we just stick on this example for a second, lament the loss of a tree, that's the formal version. How might we have said that in an informal way? Kalayaris are crying. Instead of are crying, they lament the loss. Beautiful. Passive and active way. Yes, can you find examples of the passive voice? Raji, can you find examples of the passive voice? Because you're absolutely right. Yes, again, Kalayaris, his father rather than his dad. Nice one. Invisible cloak, upset about the tree, what they might say instead. Jivan, upon his return home instead of when he got back home. Yeah, absolutely. Emitted by the splitting of the tree's body. Yeah, very formal language that, isn't it, Crazy Cat? Yeah. He has since been allowed to return home might be one. Yeah, rather than saying they let him go home afterwards. They would feel bad about the tree instead of lamenting the loss of the tree. Yes, nice one. Shot Batalix. Until further notice is formal. An informal way to say it would be diversion will not be there. Will be there until taken down later. Yeah, awesome. Did they put locals lament the loss for alliteration? You know what? I didn't, because I wrote this. I did it completely by accident. I guess I'm just really talented at doing creative writing. We would try and avoid doing deliberate alliteration in a piece of writing like this because it's supposed to be very formal, very straight, very objective. Okay? You guys are absolutely amazing with the stuff that you're able to pick out already. This is so good. Fantastic stuff. Okay. So are we happy that we've been able to spot all of these things in our example? Because we're now going to dive in a little bit further into what each of these might mean. Okay, so here is our table. We're just going to talk about these features. Now that we've seen what they look like, we're just going to describe them in a little bit more detail so that we've got a really nice grid that we can refer back to later when you end up doing pieces of writing of your own in this journalistic style. Okay, so if we're looking under again, let's see what each of these refers to. So, on the right-hand side, in your column on the right, you will see examples of what it is and what it isn't. Okay, so in red, you will have examples of something that is not what we're trying to do. And in black and underlined, you will have examples of what we are trying to do. Okay, so for those of you talking about fighting, move on, please. So, unexciting punctuation. So we use the bare essentials of punctuation for clarity and accuracy. We're not trying to excite a reader. So we're going to have full stops, commas, semicolons, colons, brackets, hyphens if needed, apostrophes. We're going to have that really basic punctuation to get things across, to make things clear, to communicate effectively, to put things as briefly as they need to be. Okay. We're not going to be having things like exclamation marks, question marks, dashes. You guys already spotted every single one of those in our conversation just a couple of minutes ago. So you already did the examples before I needed to show you, which is why all of this stuff comes from you. You guys have the information, you're sharing it with each other, we are guiding ourselves through this. Okay, the second one, noun phrases and apposition. The way that I've phrased it in my definition here is we stack up information about our sentence header to be as efficient as possible. Now, I put some examples over there straight afterwards. Mr. Provis, head of English at my headspace, says to do it like this. Let's not get confused. If we said, Neil Trivedi is a maths whiz and general cool dude who speaks English well, that's not noun phrases in apposition. Now I'm going to set a little challenge for you because I know some of you are drifting off into other conversations. How could we turn that example about Neil into a noun phrase in apposition? So who's going to share it in the chat? So I've said this is not an example of noun phrases in apposition. Who can turn that sentence into apposition for me? Let's see it in the chat. Some of you having a go. Let's have a look. Can we turn it into noun phrases in apposition? So if you look at the example above, you will see how it's done for me, for Mr. Provis, head of English at my headspace, says to do this. So we say the noun, we do another version of the noun, and then we have our verb. Turan, Neil Trivedi, a maths whiz at my headspace, speaks English well. Perfect. Perfect. Okay, that would be a really good example there. But you've missed out one of the bits of apposition, haven't you? The maths teacher, Mr. Neil Trivedi, whose age is blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so if you were to change the sentence, that would work. Lashan, you got it. That's perfect. Neil Trivedi, maths whiz and general cool dude, speaks English well. Shop Battleix, Neil Trivedi, a maths whiz at my headspace, speaks English well. Nice. Yeah, you guys are getting it. Perfect. Some of you are changing his name. Some of you are changing his name a little bit, but that's fine. Crazy Cat, science teacher at my headspace, Laura. So again, apposition. Some of you are turning this into a news article. The cool dude who speaks English really well is Neil Trivedi, maths whiz. Yep, so you've rearranged the syntax there, but that still works. Atif, Neil Trivedi, whose best friend is Louis, drinks tuna smoothie. Beautiful, that's a really good example. Yeah, so some of you have decided to add in his age. I'm not sure how happy he would be at you guessing that he is 42. I might have to pass that on, Gustav. Yeah, perfect examples all round. Really great job. So if I were to do my version of it up here, I might just go, so I might have Neil Trivedi, comma, so that's my head word here. I'm going to say maths whiz, and general cool dude And then I would need to end it with speaks English, and it's behind my head. But you get the point. So we've laid out our original noun, which is Neil Trivedi. We've then given another version of that noun, Maths Whiz, and General Cool Dude. So we've got 3 bits of apposition. Okay? Perfect. Now, declarative sentence. If you have a look here, we've got this is a declarative sentence right here. That one there. And I put 3 examples underneath saying, why isn't this one a declarative? I don't think this one is either. Tell me why none of these are. So who can tell me in the chat why these are not declarative sentences, and even better, what they are instead? Who's going to share that with me? Who can tell me what these different sentences are? So why isn't this one a declarative? I don't think this one is either. Tell me why none of these are. These are all different types of sentences, not declaratives. How can you tell me, how do we know that they're not declarative? What are they instead? Okay, let's see. You guys are always bringing up Kahoot. We're not going to have Kahoots. Have exclamation marks in them, which means that they are exclamations. Question marks, meaning that it is a question. The third one is what all of you wanted to say declarative was. All of you wanted to say that declarative was one of these. This bottom one, what is this bottom one? What is this bottom one here? If I point you to the words tell me, it's an example of what? What is it? What's it going to be? Imperative. Imperative. It's a command. That bottom one is a command, which means, yes, thank you, Mason. You're absolutely right. That bottom one is a command, which means it is not declarative. It means it is imperative. So if you want to label this, that's an imperative. Forgive my dreadful handwriting. This is an exclamation, which most of you managed to point out already. And this one is obviously a question. Now, if you want to feel really nerdy, I'm sure some of you do, fellow nerds like me, you can call a question an interrogative. What? I'm going to write that at the bottom for you, just in case you are interested. But we can call a question an interrogative. Now, if you went back to school and you used the word interrogative to refer to a question, your teacher is going to be incredibly impressed. Okay? Okay, so erudite, not expressive. If you look at my examples here, I've got an example of an erudite one and an expressive one. Can we point out what the difference is between those? So my example of an erudite sentence is, the collision took place whilst the other driver was inebriated, leading to an arrest and later incarceration, compared with, the car collided with its adversary at extraordinary speeds. Right? Yeah, lots of you pointing out how this is like interrogation, hence interrogative for a question like that. So my erudite sentence, how is it different from my expressive sentence? How can you tell that I'm using intelligent sounding language, not showing off or trying to wow my reader in that top example, the black one? So we're currently looking at this one here. How can we tell that that one there is erudite? And it is going to feed into register, the formal register, that we come across in a second. Let's see. Extraordinary and exaggeration. Yes, absolutely. Extraordinary is an exaggeration. We're not going to use hyperbole in the news, are we? Perfect. What else? Collided. Yeah, it doesn't sound as impressive as the collision. Neutral sounding words to describe. Yeah, so it's much more neutral looking the way that I'm doing it. But it's still impressive language. I mean, not many people of Key Stage 3 age would know these three impressive bits of vocabulary of collision, inebriated, which means drunk, and incarceration, which means being locked up. So that is clear that we've got intelligent sounding words rather than trying to be too dramatic. And there's a big clue there with that exclamation mark, isn't there? We're not trying to wow our reader. We're trying to just be clear, but also use impressive language. Belay, incarceration is where people get locked up. Incarceration is where you get locked up. You get incarcerated. Crazy Cat, what does interrogative mean? It means a question. So an interrogative sentence is a question. Yeah? Finally then, we're going to have a look at this formal register. So a formal register is to write in a formal way so readers know we are mature and can be trusted, because remember, all of this, everything that we're doing, the whole big picture of this is about being believable. It's about being legitimate. It's about being trustworthy, because the news is where people go to get the information that matters. So it has to be something that we believe. And if you write in a more formal way, people are more likely to believe you. Okay, so here's my example over here, and it's exactly the same thing. So here's my formal sentence at the top and my informal version underneath. Let's have a look. So the formal version is, the defendant is due to appear in court next week, where his case will be presented before the jury. If we were to do that in an informal way, we might say, my man is going on trial next week, gonna get banged up for sure. Okay, that is very informal. Okay, so how can we tell the difference between formal and informal language? What are the clues for formal and informal language? What are the clues that we can see the difference between formal and informal register? Help me out. I want to see these ideas popping off on the chat. Yep, the dash was a good spot. That shows that it's informal. Nice one. Still relating it to the punctuation from before. We've got slang words. Yeah, we've got defendant versus my man. Yeah, language used, slang, punctuation. Yeah, 100%. So we want to avoid that slang, loads of slang, informal stuff. Uses less grammatical language. It is less grammatical. Gonna, very informal. So if we have a look here, we've got my man instead of defendant. We've got due to appear in court next week, going on trial next week. And then we've got case presented before the jury, gonna get banged up for sure. I mean, it's also making certain assumptions, isn't it? It's not very professional. You wouldn't trust someone reading that. Sorry, if someone had written that. If you were to read that, you're not going to find it, are you? You're not going to find that particularly trustworthy. You're not going to find it particularly believable. So that's why we try and avoid that kind of language. So, amazing work today. Now, I feel like we got a whole host of new words slotted in today that we might never have come across before. And I'm really, really hoping that now that you've seen them in context in that news article, and we've discussed why we're using them, and we've discussed the definitions, and we've seen the examples, I'm hoping that we've got a good sense of what this kind of language is. So, with our new words, let's see how many of them straight into your workbooks you can do from scratch. Now, throw them into the chat as well if you are ready to. But let's see, do we know what under stands for? Do we know what cover stands for? Do we know what register means? Do we know what apposition means? Let's see. Some of you dropping off early because you've got to get to Neil, that's fine. If you didn't have a workbook put on a piece of paper, that's fine as well. That's fine. Some of you are disappearing, that's okay. No worries about it. Feel free, for those of you who are sticking around for the last couple of minutes, let's explain what each of these ones are. So can you go through these two acronyms of under and covers? Do you remember what apposition means? Do you remember what register is? Let's see. So Lashan has said under, unexciting. Unexciting punctuation specifically, yes. Noun phrases, declarative, erudite, not expressive, and register being formal. Good. Adaptability, objectivity, not quite right on that first one. Let's have a look. Let's see. Some of these chats are just flying through now. I can't even keep up. Clarity, objectivity, voices, evidence, reliability. Yes, nice one, Lashan. You are smashing it today. I've seen you throw some really good answers out there today. C, U for unexciting, C for clarity. Nice. Lots of you saying goodbye, goodbye. Have an amazing rest of your week. I'll see you next Thursday. Clarity, objective, voices, evidence, reliability. Boom. Who can tell me what register is and apposition? Now that we've done those acronyms a couple of times, who can tell me what register and apposition might be? I know some of you are bailing, that's fine. I'm gonna stick on until 5 o'clock for those of you who are here. But have a good lesson with Neil. Send in my best. Clarity, objectivity. Yep, lots of us saying the same ones. Do we remember register? Do we remember apposition? Apposition, okay, Lashan saying, grammatical construction in which noun or noun equivalent is followed by another that explains it. That is extremely formal. I like it. I like the way that you've put that together. Thanks, Louis, for teaching us. You're very welcome. Have a great day. Register is being formal. So specifically formal register is being formal, yeah? So you can have an informal register where you have lots of slang, you have lots of fun punctuation, but you can also have the formal register we're looking for in a newspaper where it is very clear, very mature, very adult, very sophisticated, using erudite language. Remember that other E. So all of those sorts of ones are really kind of valuable. So we've got under, we've got covers, we've got apposition, we've got register, we've got a whole brand new host of new language that we can apply next week. So next week we are going to be doing a bit more writing, a bit more creativity. This has been very much focusing on those hard skills, those hard bits of language. We are then going to be getting some exciting opportunities to be creative next week, and we can apply all these skills that we've observed in this very much reading focused lesson. So the contributions are starting to dry up. Has anyone got any questions about today's lesson before I let you all go, either to Neil or on for the rest of your day? Anyone got any more questions for me? Invisible cloak, what is apposition? So someone put a perfect example, a couple of, if you scroll up, but essentially it is where you have your noun of the sentence, followed by another noun or noun phrase that describes it, and then you have your verb going on with the rest of the sentence. So you would have the first noun, Louis Provis. You would have a second noun describing it, head of English. Then you'd have your verb, thinks that you guys are amazing. Okay, so Louis Provis, head of English, thinks you guys are amazing. So that is a noun phrase in apposition. Some of you asking about homework. We don't have a homework, no. Lovely stuff. Hopefully that was clear, Invisible Cloak. Any other questions before we wrap up for today? Cool. Well, thank you so much. It's been amazing having you all. You've absolutely smashed it today. I recognise this was harder than last week. It was supposed to be. Let's see how much of this we can hold in our minds until next week when we start doing some more creative stuff, which we should all be very much looking forward to. Goodbye, see you next lesson. Thank you so much. Amazing to have you all. You guys are fantastic. Thank you for saying I'm really nice. You are also really nice. Have a wonderful evening, guys. I'm going to drop out now. So